is.
You're listening to 24/7 World Radio.
Continuing on now with our second hour today of this 20th day of February, and we have with us our most beloved George Widger, who is generally on with us every second hour on Monday. So, Brother George, welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you, thank you, Brother Eric. It's a pleasure to be on with you. Hello.
It's so good to have you, and I just want to tell you, I love your illustration of when I get you on the web here. It's a coyote. This is George with some orange circle background. I think that's very clever of you, George. You bring a smile to my face when I look at that. But what do you have for us today, my brother?
Well, just before I get to that, the icon is Wile E. Coyote, the nemesis of the Roadrunner.
Mm-hmm.
And
that I used to watch in cartoons every Saturday morning growing up. Mm-hmm. I still remember the music. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I might be able to address that. However, I need to get to my scripture verse, which is Proverbs 26, verse 1. Proverbs 26, verse 1. As snow in the summer and as rain in the harvest, so order is not seemly for a fool. So the world loves to bestow accolades on its puppets. The Vatican loves to do that. Mm-hmm. For example, in Hollywood, you have the Academy Awards, and for music, you have the Grammys for the musicians. Now, I understand this year they re-released James Cameron 1998 Titanic. They now have done a reissued it in 3D. And it seems as if that the more awards something wins, such as a film or an actor or whatever, that means the more propaganda and the more sin it promulgates.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, okay, so as you said, here in North America, it's still February the 20th. So that means the 1-year anniversary of the Russian incursion into Ukraine is coming up, I guess, Friday, the 24th, I guess. So that drama keeps on going.
That's the Ukraine, yeah, that's the Ukraine that was under Stalin during the USSR. That was the Ukraine that was greatly persecuted by the Jesuits running the Bolsheviks because they hated the Orthodox peoples. And I just consider it the continual counter-reformation, hateful hatred of the Orthodox Ukrainians and the Russians during this long, drawn-out, murderous war where the men on both sides are condemned heretics, according to the Council of Trent, and Zelensky and Putin can work together, as they always do on both sides.
Okay, well, there's some people in the so-called alternative media who say, well, maybe Putin has left the reservation. Maybe he had an epiphany, and maybe he's a true nationalist. No. Well, that seems highly unlikely. I know you and I have discussed this off air before, and you don't agree with that assessment.
Not at all. Putin was KGB. KGB was run by the Jesuits after what was known as the NKVD. You read Solzhenitsyn's work, and it talks about our medieval inquisitors. They were inquisitors, and they were also aided and abetted by Wild Bill Donovan, who at the time of World War II was the head of the OSS, not a Malta, as we talked, and he was a good friend of the head of the NKVD. He went to Russia to speak with him. I document it in my book that I quoted from Anthony K. Brown in The Last Hero concerning Donovan. So no, they've all worked together, the KGB, CIA, now FSB, SVR, CIA, FBI, they all work together, and the leaders of those nations are all kept in tow by the intelligence community. So Putin is playing good cop, Zelensky's playing bad cop. They're all working together because watch who dies and how the Jesuit order will benefit from it.
Well, just before we came on at the top of the hour, they, I guess they're running the news and they're saying that China has officially been neutral during this whole conflict. And okay, so that reminds me that you need to, when people say something, you need to translate it into real speak, meaning neutral, meaning yes, they're supporting both sides.
Sure, China's always been on the side of communist Russia. They've never been enemies. That Cold War lie that they were going to fight against each other. And there was a shootout between the Chinese and the Russians. It's all for public consumption because the press is totally controlled by the papists in this country, using their certain court Jews, but other Gentiles, is totally possessed. They are controlled. And so hence they give us the illusion that China may be an enemy of Russia. Nonsense. Never. China was built by this military government and banking in New York. China is just like Russia was. So they all work together.
Okay, well, so it just like, being neutral, it's like you need to translate other words into what they actually mean, because they may use a word a certain way and it means just the opposite. So, for example, they say a movie is based on a true story, translation, it's utter hogwash. They say, oh, he died of natural causes, or there's no foul play suspected. Translation, he was murdered.
Yep, that's right. Black is white and white is black. That's the Jesuit maxim. We say one thing, we mean another. Doctors say do one thing, do another. So that's the reality that we live in, yes.
Yes. So I need to talk about something that took place, a couple weeks ago in eastern Ohio, East Palestine, Ohio, which is northeastern Ohio, right on the border of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Well, the official story was that I guess on the 3rd of this month, there was a train derailment in this town in the Buckeye State. And the train has something, okay, there's, as I said before, there is the official story, and then there's what actually happened. I have
one question before you get into that, George. Palestine? Is that how you say the name of the town? Palestine?
Well, in the media, they say Palestine.
Palestine. Okay. I think that's what my associate calls it. The question is it white? Predominantly white? And is it Catholic or is it predominantly Protestant? Those two questions are very important questions in understanding this whole matter. But go ahead.
Well, okay, to answer that question, whether you're talking about East Palestine or Palestine, is generally speaking the case in the United States for a long time, probably 200 years, is your more traditional, conservative, white, Bible-believing people live in the country, and whereas everybody else lives in your major urban cities.
That's because we've been driven out of places of power by the Jesuits when they put their Catholics in power.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, given the agrarian history of America, that may be partially true, but they tend to be farmers. I mean, back in 1900, so you're talking about just over 120 years ago, half of all Americans lived on a farm.
That's true, but we also ran the cities because we founded cities like Philadelphia, City of Brotherly Love. That was the Bible name of Book of Revelation. So Protestants founded the major cities. The Catholics took them over with all the immigration, with all the invasion that they were used by the Jesuits to do, to take over the cities first, and then farmlands would follow, just as Chiniquy spoke of in his 50 years in the Church of Rome.
Now, we were just talking about Russia a moment ago, back here, also in the year 1900. Something like 80% of all Russians lived on a farm. It was an agrarian country. Also, this is according to mainstream sources. In 1900, so 123 years ago or thereabouts, not only did 4 to 5 Russians live on a farm, almost all of them went to church, of some mostly Russian Orthodox. But you had other churches in Russia as well. It's just like Russia was like, the Bolsheviks said Russia was one of the most religious, /superstitious, they say, countries in the world. We need to fix that. They had all these backward ideas, like the man provided for the family.
Yeah.
They had couples would have 7, 8 children.
Oh, how terrible. Yeah. Living biblically. And the other thing is, too, I would add, is that, remember, Tsar Alexander I in 1820 kicked the Jesuits out of Russia. And Tsar Alexander I was disseminating the Bible, the Reformation Bible, among his Russian people, too. And 3 years later, he closed all the Masonic lodges. This was Alexander I did. And so 2 years later, he dies of apoplexy, which really means he's poisoned. So this Alexander I facilitated the gospel preaching in Russia during his reign as king, especially his last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, so anyhow, that reminds me. I was going to talk about. Well, let me get back to East Palestine. So there was a book that was written in 1985 called White Noise. The author of it, I have it here in my notes, is Don Novello.
White Noise, and the author is Don. How do you spell his last name?
Okay, I can check the spelling for you in just a second. I have too many things. Okay, yes, White Noise. Don DeLillo. Actually, Eric Rodriguez actually sent this to me. He was born on November the 20th, 1936. So he shares the same birthday as Joe Biden. He was just born 6 years earlier. DeLillo got his undergrad degree from Fordham University.
Undergrad, his BS degree. Fordham.
Correct. So
he's Jesuit trained.
Correct. So Donald Richard DeLillo, who was born November 20th, 1936, as I said, got his undergrad degree from Fordham. So he wrote a book called White Noise, which was turned into a film back in 2022 on Netflix, which is an online streaming service for those who don't know. So in this novel, it takes place in this fictitious college in eastern Ohio, and there's a train derailment, and gallons and gallons of poisonous fumes get released and kill thousands of people. And now, as I said, this is simply a novel. Well, in the film adaptation on Netflix, they actually shot it in East Palestine, Ohio. As a matter of fact, they had a number of the residents were actually extras in the film.
So in 86, you say?
85.
85.
Yes.
Published White Noise. And in that book, this takes place in eastern Ohio. Is it in the town of Palestine? Palestine?
It doesn't they don't call it that in the novel or the film, but it's actually shot in the film. It's actually shot in East Palestine, Ohio.
Oh, it's shot there. So
Yes.
It's shot in the town. Okay. The town. Okay, and you got a train derailment. You have chemicals released that kill people.
Yes, I have not read the book. It's on my. I have a bunch of other books on my list, but I'll get to it eventually. Mm-hmm. So
this is similar to the book. I think it was released in the 80s also, that talked about the coronavirus.
Correct. Dean Kuntz, I forgot the name of the book, but in it mentions something called Wuhan 400, which is the base. The root of 400 is 20 times 20.
Mm-hmm. 2020, and that's when it was released. So that's when we are oppressed with it. Let's put it that way. I think John Rappaport's explanation of the coronavirus is absolutely right on target, but recommend the listeners listen and read the works of John Rappaport. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, so if you look at Don DeLillo's bio, this actually says this on his Wikipedia page. Okay, his works have covered subjects as diverse as television, nuclear war, sports, the complexities of language, performance art, the Cold War, mathematics, the advent of the digital age, politics, economics, and global terrorism. So basically,
sounds like a writer for the Jesuit order and what they intend to do.
Exactly. So I guess this is an example of predictive programming, because they always tip their hand. They let us know years, sometimes decades ahead of time, what their intentions are.
Jordan Maxwell was very famous for saying that. Of course, he came out against the Jesuits many, many times. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you may be wondering all right. So boots on the ground. Okay, Richard Michael DeWine, who was born on January 5th, 1947, is the 70th and current governor of Ohio. Now, he's a Republican, but that means almost nothing. And so in terms of pure tyranny, in at least the U.S., Ohio is probably just as bad as any other place. California, New York, Michigan, However, they decided he got sued, and he had to tap on the brakes on the tyranny in the Buckeye State.
Mm-hmm.
So
So DeWine got sued, and
well,
he had to stop the tyranny that he was imposing.
Well, yes, because I'm not really familiar with their law there, but I guess several people filed lawsuits. They said, "Hey, you know what? You're invoking the Emergency Act of such and such year, and you've exceeded your limit. Therefore, you need to put the kibosh on all your measures." So he backed down. However,
well, he's Roman Catholic, of course, a good Irish Catholic, I believe, and busy serving the Pope. And I'm sure he was briefed before this happened because he's a conspirator in this. None of this happens by coincidence. And furthermore, someone sent me the owners of that railroad company, and the one at the top of the list is Vanguard, which the Jesuits, Knights of Malta run that thing. So it's an absolute Jesuit creation of a crisis out of which they will kill lots of people and justify draconian things to resist the very crisis that they created, exactly as they did with the Great Depression and the resultant proclamations of FDR.
Okay, so here's something people don't seem to realize. So the governor in the United States, and this is actually true in other countries, but I'll talk specifically about our country. The governor acts as a liaison between the federal government and local governments. All the activities that go on in a particular state, shootings, bombings, train derailments, have to be cleared through the governor. Not that they need his permission or her permission, depending on the state. And they said, "Hey, this is what we're going to be doing next year."
I maintain that's exactly what they talk about in the governor's meetings. Remember, the president is first and foremost commander in chief. We're under military government, and the governors, therefore, are the commanders in chiefs of their states under military occupation, the states being conquered territories under the commander in chief in Washington, in District of Catholics, District of Criminals, and Communists. And so, therefore, they are absolutely subordinate to what the commander in chief wants to do because it's a military operation. So you're right, George. I'm convinced that they are subject to the commander in chief. And by the way, Jesse Ventura was honest enough when he became governor of Minnesota. Correct. That there was a bunch of people sitting in a semicircle in the basement of the Capitol there, and they said, "We're from the CIA, and we'll be watching what you do." So if that's the case with the governor of Minnesota, it's the same with all the other governors. They're all overseen by the commander in chief's intelligence community, made sure they're going to do exactly what they're told.
Okay, so you had a couple other recent events this month. A week ago on the 13th, I believe, you had a shooting at Michigan State, East Lansing, Michigan. Now, for what it's worth, East Lansing is a suburb of Lansing, which is the capital of the Wolverine State. Now, Lansing and East Lansing are located in Ingham County. However, Lansing is the capital of Michigan, but is not the seat of Ingham County. Forgive me for boring you with all these superfluous details. The actual seat of Ingham County is Mason. And I realize that's just a coincidence. But anyhow, the official story is last week on 13th, a 43-year-old black man named LeRae, I believe, went on campus and shot a bunch of people. And
were they black or were they white?
They're white.
Okay, it's not a race crime, is it? Because it's okay to shoot and kill white people.
Okay, so
that's when you're woke. When you're all woked up, you can shoot and kill white people, and the government just claps their hands. So here's this black savage, and he comes and he shoots these white people, which is not going to be reported on any news media because they're going to keep the race issue out of this because it's a destruction of the white race day in and day out. And my other question is, with a nation full of 350 million people, you're going to have gun crimes every day. That's not my concern. Why should it be our concern what goes on in Michigan? I'm concerned what happens in Pennsylvania with a gun crime. We can solve that crime by just arming everybody and killing the individual who committed the crime and so fast back down, no more gun crime. That's how it works. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyhow, last month on the 25th, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, gave her State of the State address, and she was talking about how great things are in Michigan. He said, "Well, we weathered the pandemic, and we had to make a lot of sacrifices, and people suffered, and we lost some businesses, but we're going to come back better and stronger."
Build back better. There we go. That's a nice
yes,
communist phrase. Yeah. Okay.
Well, anyhow, she said, however, despite what the Supreme Court ruled last year and what other states have done, like Mississippi, Indiana, Oklahoma, Ohio, we're going to guarantee a woman's right to murder her baby. I mean, we're going to guarantee freedom of choice in Michigan.
Why, sure. We got to have those white people killing their babies. Now, it's not the blacks killing their babies. That's the majority. It's the white women killing their babies. That's the majority. And that's why that filthy Jesuit, what was his name? Robert Drinan, was the big backer of the abortion bill when he was a congressman in Massachusetts. The Jesuits want abortion, want murder of the children, and especially the white people to murder their children. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is insignificant. Go ahead.
Well, do you know who replaced Drinan?
Who? Oh, that filthy sodomite Barney Frank.
Correct.
Thank you, George. Mm-hmm.
So at Drinan's behest.
Yeah. Drinan was a sodomite too. So from one sodomite to another. That's wonderful, wonderful political leaders there in Massachusetts. Okay, might as well call Massachusetts Red China or Albania or something like that. But go ahead.
Well, you know, funny you should bring that up because this Wednesday is my birthday, and it is also the same birthday as Ted Kennedy.
Oh, that papal knight, socialist, communist, white Protestant hating, Baptist hating, serial adulterer, wicked sinner, co-conspirator in the murder of his nephew, John Kennedy Jr. Just a wonderful man. Go ahead.
Well, hey, nobody's perfect, but
there you go.
And now, so something I was saying, and I guess a few days ago you had it wasn't a training room. There's a fire at a I guess a nursery in Kissimmee, Florida. Now, before I address that, so you have Mike DeWine, the Roman Catholic governor of Ohio. You have Gretchen Whitmer, who is not only Protestant, but she's daughter of the Eastern Star. When she was a cat Kappa Alpha Theta, which is
she's a prostitute Protestant. Okay, apostate yes. Prostitute Protestant. She's a crypto Catholic. That's what she is.
Well, she's a known member of the Order of the Eastern Star.
Oh, there you go. Just like Hellcat Hillary, and just like Rosa Parks. That mulatto who helped to start the whole civil rights movement, she was a member of the Eastern Stars. Yeah, all orchestrated in the Highlander School in Tennessee a year before it happened. Then go ahead.
Okay, so I guess a few days ago you had a fire at a nursery in Kissimmee, Florida, which is, I guess, near Orlando. Is I guess Central Florida. If I want to.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that reminds me. So I don't have any concrete evidence that it was a staged event. It's just more of a gut feeling. Now, bear in mind, Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. He too, like DeWine, is a Roman Catholic. Now, you're talking about the Hegelian dialectic, good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, he plays good cop. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so that reminds me, there was an old slogan, a propaganda slogan from my old communist radio station, KGO Radio 810 out of San Francisco, which was KGO, that stands for Communist, the Russian spelling, Gulag Organization.
And remember, the Jesuits have been the masters of San Francisco since 1850, according to Janicki, in his 50 years.
So, one of the slogans was, quote, if you're talking about it, we're talking about it, close quote. Well, meaning if we're discussing things like what's going on in Kissimmee, Florida, that means they want us to. Okay, so this is my gut feeling. Getting back to Ohio, something like 30 million Americans get their drinking water from the Ohio River. So you're talking not quite 10%, like 8-9% of the U.S. population. So there's a huge number of people who have a contaminated water source. Now, granted, they can get bottled water, but it's going to make life much harder to function, because they still, even though they may be able to consume bottled water, they still, how are they going to take a shower? How are they going to wash their clothes? Do that sort of stuff. Now, some people have called this the American Chernobyl. And God only knows how bad the damage is going to be and how far the smoke clouds are going to travel or have traveled, or what the long-term repercussions of this are going to be. Now, if you think about it, if the rail lines are properly maintained, such as they put
There's no way for that to happen. That's exactly right. No way.
Yeah. Well, if the United States didn't spend at least $100 billion over Ukraine last year, well, that might be a different story.
Or if the United States hadn't rebuilt Germany with the finest rail lines in Europe, that when you're going down the rails, there's no breaking of the rails. We should have that beautiful rail line in this country, but oh no, we can't have it. So that's exactly right. So I have a big rail line that goes by me, and they, lots of cars. And there's never a problem with the rail lines. If you maintain them, they're going to be just fine. So this had to be an act of sabotage, or an act that was done deliberately. We must accept this now. We have to realize that there's nothing conspiracy theorist about this. It's conspiracy fact, because those trains are not getting derailed unless someone's involved in bringing that to pass. With that amount, 50 cars full of those chemicals? I think that was going 50 miles an hour through the center of town, which was against the law. They were supposed to go something like 35. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is basically an act of war.
That's right. Against who?
The American people.
That's right. They've been waging war against us since March 9th, 1933, with the imposition of the Emergency Banking Relief Act and Proclamation 2040. The Commander-in-Chief is waging war on everybody in this country considered an enemy belligerent. Heretic Protestants and liberal Roman Catholics. They care not who they kill, to destroy Western civilization. All right, George. Okay, we'll be back in a moment with our beloved George Widger, who comes up with all these wonderful facts. So we'll be back in a moment here at 24/7 World Radio.
This is 24/7 World Radio, and you're listening to The Eric John Phelps Show.
This is Brother Nicholas. Join me every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the German Bible Truth Hour, and at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dutch Bible Truth Hour on 24/7 World Radio. This is Bruder Nicholas. Ich lade euch herzlich ein, mich anzuhören jeder Dienstag um 2 Uhr nachmittags, amerikanische Zeit, für die deutsche Bibelwahrheitsstunde und 3 Uhr amerikanische Standardzeit für die niederländische Bibelwahrheitsstunde am World Radio 24/7. Dit is broeder Nico. U bent hartelijk uitgenodigd om elke dinsdag om 2 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Duitse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen en 3 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Nederlandse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen op 24/7 World Radio.
This is The Eric John Phelps Show on 24/7 World Radio.
Radio with Brother George. Please continue, Brother George.
Okay, so I just like to go back to the Gretchen Whitmer's State of the State address on January 25th. If I didn't know any better, I say she could be Gavin Newsom's younger sister. I've watched her State of the State. I've watched Kathy Hochul in New York. I've not watched Gavin Newsom in California, but they're all basically saying the same thing. Come to Michigan, come to New York, come to California. Jobs are plentiful. Life is swell. We'll let you murder your babies. We'll disarm you. We'll shove.
And we'll let you get robbed, raped, and murdered by the majority of savage blacks in our major cities. Just continue to come there. You know, I listen to a guy named Jason Hansen. He's got a very good work where he teaches people to fight and be armed and so on. But he never talks about these major cities that are a threat, that they're black. So just come to our state and come to our black sections of town where they can rob, rape, and murder you. But go ahead.
No, for not to pick on the Wolverine state, if you get out of places like Detroit, it's a wonderful place.
It is.
I'm sorry?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Now, granted, it can be a little bit on the chilly side during the winter, but places like Sault Ste. Marie, places like, I'm drawing a blank, places like Sault Ste.
Marie. They have that beautiful hotel there. What's on the island? What's it called? They filmed that movie somewhere in time on that island. It's in Michigan. Go ahead. I believe it's in Michigan.
Yes, but once you get out of places like Detroit and Pontiac and so forth, it's conservative, it's traditional, it's old-fashioned. There's virtually no crime unless you have orchestrated events. So, however, as I said to you before, if you look at almost in any U.S. state, take Missouri, for example, almost all the crimes are carried out and take place in St. Louis, which is the far east, or Kansas City, which is in the far west. Places like Joplin and so forth, Independence, they have
the ones that commit most of the crime are blacks. So that status always needs to be mentioned too. And the Jesuits want it that way. They like it because they're driving all these apostate whites, Protestants, and Catholic liberals into the new right. So they love black on white crime. They want these majority savage blacks to do it every day to drive the ignorant and godless apostate white man into the hands of the American Stalin or Hitler, whoever you want to call him. Go ahead.
Okay, and I could, theoretically, 10, 15 years ago, I might have actually fallen for that myself. That's another conversation altogether. And one of the things that Whitmer said is, no, I'm not against law-abiding gun owners, people, hunters and people like that. All right, I want to try to I need to watch my language here, but that's what's too cool. I'll just leave it at that, because communists like to say, well, back in the late 18th century, when the U.S. Constitution was written and they had, and they wrote the Second Amendment, for the most part, they only had muskets for long guns and they had flintlocks for handguns. Well, even though
wait a second. That's sick argument can be completely destroyed by saying the guns that they had were parity with the British guns. So we should have parity for the guns of the government, so that when they become a tyranny, we can resist them by the power of the Spirit of God. There always has to be parity or equality between the guns that the people have and the guns that the military has. That's why we buy AR-15s and AK-47s and so on.
Oh, okay. However, they said, well, the founding fathers, 250 years ago or 230 years ago, whatever it was, couldn't imagine the AR-15 and things like that, all the advances in technology that take place over the next 200 plus years. So that's why we need to have.
But it doesn't matter. That's a moot point, because the government has AR-15s. How are you going to resist a tyrannical government if you don't have one too? So it's a justification to take your guns, as all good communists and socialists and fascists want to do. Remember, the fascists disarmed the German people. So they love it. And by the way, the founding fathers knew all about tyranny, knew all about it. They were familiar with the tyranny of the English kings and how Cromwell was used to resist it. That was merely what? 120 years before them. It was recent history. So no, that's another sickening, bogus academic argument that can easily be defeated in debate. Go ahead.
Okay, well, if you look at other countries, I know we talked about Australia, for example. Well, for what it's worth, they actually came out with their current constitution back in 1901. It's been modified several times since then, but it's based on the U.S. Constitution, for what it's worth. Actually, several other countries based their constitutions on the American model, such as the Kingdom or the Empire of Germany, 1871. And
they had their Second Reich, which was Protestant. Led by the great Protestant Otto von Bismarck, who every German should have a picture of him in their home.
Okay, so anyhow, if you look at Australia, so for most of the 20th century, it had a reputation of being a very laid back, mellow country. Is basically some of the U.S. You could say the same thing about New Zealand, Canada. Well, Canada is a different story, but definitely apartheid South Africa, because Australia, in addition to being laid back, mellow, they love their freedom, they love their liberty, and just doing their thing, raising their families, running their farms, running their businesses, things like that. But that all started to change, well, in the 1990s. Well, before that, but it got really bad during the 1990s, because prior to the Port Arthur shooting in April of 1996, there were no national gun laws in Australia. So,
and the other thing is, they were inciting the blacks of Australia against the whites, and they were teaching the black savages there to call the whites of Australia maggots. And I have that from a student from Australia who told that to me in open class. So they're doing the same black agitation in Australia that they're doing here in Canada and England and Scotland and Sweden, you name it. It's the same agitation by the same secret society.
Okay, so now I've not talked much about her neighbor, New Zealand. Historically, the largest faith in New Zealand is Presbyterianism. It was settled mostly by people from Scotland or Scots-Irish. Mm-hmm. So the dominant faith in those areas are Presbyterianism. They have other churches. So, and it's uncanny how similar New Zealand is to actually Scotland in terms of the weather, things.
It has over 1 million sheep in it. It's a big sheep industry. A beautiful white Protestant nation with gun ownership and no crime. Mm-hmm.
Well, they used to. Now they've been basically disarmed because of the.
Well, they got to prepare them for the Chinese invasion, so they can be wiped out.
Well,
how the Jesuits will rejoice to kill all those apostate white Protestant Presbyterians when the Chinese arrive, to kill them all and take that beautiful island, because they will.
Well, now speaking of Scotland, this is a little factoid I just came across. Somebody shared this with me, that for over the previous decade, about 12,000 people in Scotland will die. Roughly 1,000 a month. Now there are some fluctuations. However, the number doubled in 2022, and for some inexplicable reason, which is a huge spike for a relatively short period of time. And it seems to be a mystery as to why all these Scottish people are dying.
Isn't that terrible? They're white anyway. Those white devils, they all need to die. George, come on, you need to get woke here. We ought to rejoice of the death of white people. Don't you get it? Furthermore, I want to bring up one more thing. That white Australian student that I had in one of my classes, he said, Eric, he says, the Australian military has purchased Japanese subs, or the subs have all Japanese writing on them. And we believe that's for the day when the Asians, the Japanese, Chinese take over Australia. All their subs are ready to go. Yeah, Go ahead.
So, I guess, well, maybe it's not a bad thing. The land of John Knox needs to be destroyed.
That evil, wicked sinner, that John Knox, that's right. Whom the Mary Queen of Scots hated his guts. And it was John Knox who baptized the man who would be King James the First of England, and putting out our wonderful AB 1611 Bible. So we got to get rid of this John Knox and his history of the Reformation in Scotland. Got to do away with that. That's why they moved his statue behind the church there, and I think it's, what's the capital, Edinburgh, because the good old commie Jesuits there made sure that they want to have the Scotch forget about John Knox.
And
by the way, it was John Knox who said, concerning Bloody Mary, what was it? That's Mary Stuart, Mary Queen of Scots. She said she feared the prayers of John Knox more than 10,000 English soldiers. That's a fact of history. Would to God we have a few men like Knox today.
Okay, so if I have time, I'll just mention this. One of the things that Whitmer mentioned, she said, is there are just far too many crimes being committed in the streets of Michigan, places like Detroit.
Yeah, we won't say it's majority black, will we, Jordan Question? It's just going to blame all the white people, too, for the black crime. Go ahead.
And so she said, well, okay, I think I brought this up before. Well, okay, going back almost 230-odd years ago, with the advent of the American Constitution, specifically the Second Amendment, they anticipated that governments would become tyrannical, or at least that was a possibility. And that fear has actually come to fruition. Because if you look at the 20th century alone, at least 250 million people died at the hands of the government. The term for that is called democide, death by government. Now, the number, as I said,
and the book that will teach you about that is called The Black Book of Communism, written by 4 authors. It'll tell you that it was 180 million people, I believe, killed by communism.
Oh, okay. Well, but that number is probably low. It's probably at least, as a 250 million, it's probably more like 500 million in terms of people who died of starvation, malnutrition.
Sure.
And now, whether you're talking about communists, is mostly by them, but you're talking about Nazis and fascists.
And radical Democrats like FDR and his filthy New Deal.
Yes. So
killed 10 million Americans. Go ahead.
Even if all these shootings that have taken place in the U.S., since the 1990s, were organic, they weren't false flags or FBI operations or whatever, relatively few people died at the result of places like events or Uvalde or what just happened in Michigan. Even if these are random, you had the lone gunman, relatively few people died because of that. I'm not saying
a whole lot of people die in car wrecks. A lot more people die in car wrecks. We're going to outlaw cars?
Well, funny you should say that. Yes, because to save the planet from
that's right. From the carbon. That's right.
Well,
but we won't talk about that particular business in Canada. I think it's British Columbia that can take carbon out of the atmosphere anywhere in the world. It makes fuel that is tantamount to gasoline and diesel, and it can be run in any internal combustion engine, and it's about the same price, maybe a little less of what we're paying now, and there's no carbon released into the atmosphere. It burns perfectly clean. The answer to this problem is already in the technology we have, but they don't want you to know about it, boy.
Well, actually, the solution in places like California is to ban petroleum-based vehicles by the year 2035. So all vehicles will be electric, which means they can shut. But are those actually any cleaner than combustion engines?
They're going to be terribly bad for your health because you're going to sit in the center of that AC current in that car. And it's going to work against your body, which is DC current. So it's going to cause the weakening of the immune system that will facilitate degenerative disease.
Well, I take great umbrage to that, Brother Eric, because Gavin Newsom only has our best interest at heart.
Oh, I know. That's right. The good Catholic nephew of the good Catholic Nancy Pelosi and the good Catholic Brown family working for the Jesuits only have our good interests at heart. That's why they're facilitating the Sino-Soviet Muslim invasion and have driven the majority white people out of California. California is not a white state anymore. Go ahead.
And Texas won't be one by 2025.
So bringing in all the alien, Hispanic, savage Roman Catholic invaders, because they commit their hundreds of thousands of crimes against white people in Texas every day. But apparently the Texans have lost their manhood, and so they're just going to let it happen.
So I guess it will be. I guess they can mess with Texas.
That's right.
So if you lose Texas,
people in Texas watch the same damnable TV with the same damnable drug propaganda of the network. Go ahead, George.
Oh, okay. So if you lose Texas, you basically lose the country.
When you lose Texas, you're going to have the new right. All those angry white men are armed to the teeth, and there will come somebody that will call them for them to unite and get rid of this problem. That's why they're going to round up all these Hispanic savages in Texas, and they're going to send them to the concentration camps that are built and ready to go. That's what's coming. The new right is going to happen. And Biden is making sure that it will happen. I always said Obama built Trump. Biden's building the new right of whatever dictator's coming along for that.
So, I mean, before that, and there's a president, you had Jimmy Carter who built Ronald Reagan.
That's right. Jimmy Carter, who gave away the Panama Canal by way of a Jesuit that was his counselor for it.
So, and of course, before, back in the 30s, you had Neville Chamberlain who gave rise to Winston Churchill.
Correct. That Masonic traitor to England. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they they basically run the same plays over
and over. Wash, rinse, and repeat. It's the same deal. But the white American people are too godless to get it. I've been on this broadcast for 20 years, between this and another radio station. I should have all sorts of people saying, Phelps, you're right about that. They all work together. What can we do about it? I'll tell you, this is exactly what we need to do. What was done in history in the past. But they don't want to know. So I've come to the conclusion that the vast majority of American white people couldn't care less about the historical past, which means they're going to go right into the new right. And they will be the strong arm of the Jesuit order in rounding up the six-sided enemy that they've created in this country for extermination. And until there's repentance, that's exactly what's going to happen. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so on a lighter note, over the weekend, James Timothy MacArthur, died. Now, for those out of the United States, he was a radio announcer, for a baseball announcer, and he also played baseball himself for over 20 years, from 1959 to 1980. So why do I bring him up? He was born on the 16th of October, 1941, in Memphis, Tennessee. He went to Christian Brothers High School in that town, and who's a devout, lifelong Roman Catholic.
Now, tell us about the Christian Brothers, because I have a dear brother in Christ that was educated by him in Ireland. How they beat him, nearly blinded him in his eye from beating him. They're savages. The Christian Brothers are nothing but junior Jesuits.
Mm-hmm. Well, Edmund Rice, who founded the Christian Brothers, was trained by the Jesuits. Now,
what's his name? What's his name?
Rice, as in like.
What's his first name?
Edmund. Yes.
Edmund Rice, founder of Christian Brothers.
Well, his full name was Edmund Ignatius Rice.
Oh, Ignatius. We got to have an Ignatius in there. Good old Ignatius de Loyola.
Okay, so he lived from the 1st of June, 1762, died on August the 29th, 1844. He was a Catholic missionary, and he founded the Christian Brothers and the Presentation Brothers. So, just for clarification, the last religious order to be created in the Catholic Church was the Jesuits, officially known as the Society of Jesus. I know this is a little blasphemous, but all the other orders are called congregations, and they were created by the Jesuits, the Redemptionists, the Society of St. Paul, Vincent de Paul, and so forth. They're largely teaching groups or philanthropy organizations, such as St. Vincent de Paul. They run soup kitchens, homeless shelters, thrift stores, places like that.
Very powerful people are in that order of St. Vincent de Paul, the congregation. Luigi de Santis speaks about it in his book, Popery, Puseyism, and Jesuitism, that he wrote like in 1870, thereabouts. I have an original copy. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so they're established back in 1802. So you're talking about 220 years ago. And so they run formal education in the Irish Republic. As a matter of fact, most of the schools there are run by the Christian Brothers.
Mm-hmm. Weren't you telling me that the Irish Republic would not allow any Jews in the country?
Oh, okay.
But Protestant Northern Ireland did allow them in the country?
Okay, well, back in 1983, there was a British documentary called The Jews of Belfast, written and narrated by Harry Taub, who lived from 1925 to 2009. He's probably not that well known in the United States, although he did appear in the movie Patton. He played the cook. He was in Le Mans, The Blue Max, but he's probably known for his television work, such as programs like Doctor Who and The Avengers. Well, Taub, as I said, back 40 years ago, did this documentary called The Jews of Belfast. And he said his grandfather came over from Russia back in the 19th century. And he started out with a little presentation.
And this guy's a Jew, right?
Yes, they're Harry Taub. So he said
Harry Taub, K-A-L-B?
T-A-W-B.
T-A-W-B, okay.
Okay, so back in the 1930s, he was walking through the bad section of Belfast in Northern Ireland. And
The bad section? You mean the Roman Catholic section?
Well,
yeah,
perhaps.
The Roman Catholic section. That's right.
I don't know all the details. So he was about 10 years old, and a couple of hooligans came up to him and he said, "What foot do you kick with?" And I guess that's code said, "Are you Protestant or Catholic? If you kick with your right foot, that means you're Protestant. If you kick with your left, you're Catholic." And Harry's response was, "I don't kick with either foot. I'm a Jew." So the leader of the ruffians said, "Well, are you a Catholic or a Protestant Jew?" Now, Kyle said, "I know that may sound like a joke, but that actually happened." So that served as a segue into this whole documentary. And because of various diasporas in Europe in the 19th century, specifically Russia, you had a huge number of Jews that ended up moving to the British Isles. Initially to places like Limerick and Cork in the south, which is Catholic, but they weren't well received there. So they got invited to leave.
Oh, I like that. The invited to leave. What they were driven out by the Jesuits running Cork and the Ireland there, the southern part, which was still part of the British Empire then.
Okay, so
okay,
so you're talking like 180 years ago, 170 years ago, thereabouts. So most of the expatriate Jews from Russia and other places ended up settling in Belfast, hence the name of the documentary, or in Hull.
Wow, that's when you said that to me yesterday. I shouldn't be shocked, but remember, listeners, that Hull was bombed by the Jesuit-ruled Nazi Luftwaffe, and Churchill knew all about it. And he said, "We're not going to stop the bombing or shoot at those bombers, because then they'll know that we have the Enigma machine and we can decipher what they're saying in their machine." Well, they work together. Come on. So Churchill was behind the bombing of the Protestant town of Hull and the Protestant city of Coventry, carried out by the Nazi Goering's Luftwaffe. This makes perfect sense. So the Protestants also hosted Jews. They didn't persecute the Jews, which is our doctrine. And so there were Jews killed in Hull and Jews killed in Coventry with the bombing, as well as Protestants. Go ahead.
Okay, so they, even though they seem totally out of place, they, for the most part, adapted. As a matter of fact, one of the first, the son of one of the founders of Belfast actually became Lord Mayor of Belfast. Jaffe, I believe his name was, Otto Jaffe. He was a German Jew. It would have been pronounced Jaffe, but they anglicized the pronunciation. But so the Jews went from being complete strangers to doing.
But I think he was a Protestant. I think he was a racial Jew that was a Protestant, just like Disraeli. Disraeli had to convert to the Anglican faith before he could be prime minister. So that was one of their tenets there. So I would look into that and see if he was a converted Jew there in Belfast.
So, but almost immediately, the Jews, the transplanted Jews in Belfast and Hull, had immediate impact on their culture. They became very prosperous. They became, well, businessmen, bankers, jewelers, craftsmen, cobblers, things like that. And the
Abrahamic covenant was in place. I'll bless those that bless you. I'll curse those that curse you. So the Lord blessed those white Gentile people for allowing them to live in their country.
Now,
George, I think you can make one more point, but I think we got to get going here. I'm going. Let's see what time we have. I think we got like 5 minutes too. But go ahead and make another point there, brother.
Well, actually, it's almost the top of the hour. So I guess perhaps we can pick this up on Monday. And I guess after Monday, we're going to be taking a break for a while.
Yeah, Monday's what, the 28th, I think?
Or the 27th?
27th, yep. The radio station will be shut down because I don't have a host anymore. So we'll have to find something else in the meantime. So yes, next Monday will be our last day on the radio. So, yeah. So go ahead. Contact information, George.
Okay, if people have any questions, comments, or concerns, critiques, please send me a line at George Widger, Widger, GEOR, 1969 GEORWDGER 1969 if they didn't get that, they can get it from you. And I'm sure I look forward to being on with you, Lord willing, next Monday. And after that, down the road in some other format.
The Lord will do it what seemeth good to him. All right, my brother. Sounds good. Lord bless, and see you next Monday.
Okay, well, take care, bro.
Bye-bye. With Eric John Phillips, thanks for tuning in. Book Vatican Assassins. Go to my website, VaticanAssassins.org. Purchase the book. You can also go to 24/7 World Radio website. I have things there. You can purchase my PPRAS broadcast. You can get my private citizenship class, advanced class, tax class. I also specialize in trust now. Finished one that I think is a very good trust. So anyway, contact me at rbpbchurch at comcast.net. I'm glad to respond to your needs. And please pray that we find another host for the station. And I'm sure ultimately it will happen. But in the meantime, let the Lord do it which seemeth good to him. Till Wednesday, Maranatha. Lord be with you.